Have all members voted? Does anyone have all members voted? Does anyone wish to change their vote? The yeas are 204, the nays are 209. The amendment is not adopted. The unfinished business is the request for a recorded vote on amendment number 3, printed in Part B of House Report 118-516 by the gentleman from South Carolina, Mr. Norman, on which further proceedings were postponed and on which the ayes prevailed by voice vote. The clerk will redesignate the amendment.
Amendment number 3, printed in Part B of House Report number 118-516, offered by Mr. Norman of South Carolina.
A recorded vote has been requested. Those in support of the request for a recorded vote will rise and be counted. A sufficient number having risen, a recorded vote is ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device. This will be a 2-minute vote. On this vote, the yeas are 408, the nays are... The yeas are 411, the nays are 0. The amendment is adopted. The unfinished business is the request for the recorded vote on amendment number 4, printed in Part B of House Report 118-516 by the gentleman from Pennsylvania, Mr. Perry, on which further proceedings were postponed and on which the ayes prevailed by voice vote. The clerk will redesignate the amendment.
Amendment number 4, printed in Part B of House Report number 118-516, offered by Mr. Perry of Pennsylvania.
A recorded vote has been requested. Those in support of the request for a recorded vote will rise and be counted. A sufficient number having risen, a recorded vote is ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device. This is a 2-minute vote.
225 and the nays are 191. The amendment is adopted. There being no further amendment under the rule, the committee rises.
Madam Chair.
Madam Speaker, the Committee of the Whole House on the State of the Union has had under consideration H.R. 4763 and pursuant to House Resolution 1243. I report the bill is amended by that resolution back to the House with sundry further amendments adopted in the Committee of the Whole. It's as fast as I can read.
The chair of the Committee of the Whole House on the Slate of the Union reports that the committee has under consideration the bill H.R. 4763 and, pursuant to House Resolution 1243, reports the bill as amended by that resolution back to the House with sundry further amendments adopted in the Committee of the Whole. Under the rule, the previous question is ordered. Is a separate vote demanded by any further amendment reported from the Committee of the Whole? If not, the chair will put them in gross. The question is on the adoption of the amendments. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. The ayes have it. The amendments are adopted. The question is on engrossment and third reading of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. Third reading.
A bill to provide for a system of regulation of digital assets by the Commodity Futures Trading Commission and the Securities and Exchange Commission and for other purposes.
The question is on passage of the bill. Those in favor will say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The bill is passed and without objection and motion. For what purpose does the gentlelady from California seek recognition?
Requesting a recorded vote.
A recorded vote has been requested. Those favoring a recorded vote will rise. A sufficient number having risen, a recorded vote is ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device. This is a 5-minute vote. On this vote, the yeas are 279 and the nays are 136. The bill is passed. Without objection, a motion to reconsider is laid on the table.
Who's first? The House will be in order. Members, take your conversations off of the floor. Who's first? Requests for 1-minute speeches. Order. Members will take their conversations off the floor. The chair will now entertain requests for 1-minute speeches. For what purpose does the gentleman from Washington seek recognition?
Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today I rise to honor the life of a dedicated first responder from Okanagan, Washington, Tiffany Furden, who we tragically lost last month. Tiffany was a volunteer firefighter and EMT for the Tonasket Fire Department and Aeneas Valley Fire Department, as well as a member of the Samaritan Riders, a group of motorcycle enthusiasts.
The House will be in order. Please continue.
A group of motorcycle enthusiasts who serve the medically challenged and socially disadvantaged children throughout our region. Her passion was making the world a better place, a quality which was clear in the work that she did. Tiffany's death is a loss for the whole community, but her legacy will never be forgotten. May her family and community continue to be blessed with her memory, and may she rest in peace. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from North Carolina seek recognition?
Speaker, I ask for unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute to advise and extend.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, with the American flag hanging, a white hearse gradually traveled down the highway, returning the remains of Staff Sergeant Robert L. Ferris Jr. home. More than 80 years after his bomber crash, Sergeant Ferris joined his family and was finally laid to rest. He was a young gunner, 20 years old during World War II, when his B-17 was shot down. This past week, he was transported from Raleigh-Durham International Airport to New Bern, a journey that took him through Wilson. Our local fire department and others came to show respect and pay special tribute to this incredible hero. There are thousands of stories like Sergeant Ferris's. As we approach Memorial Day, let us honor our fallen soldiers, POWs, MIAs, and those killed in action. Thank you. I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from South Carolina seek recognition?
Consent to address the House for 1 minute, revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Biden border crisis rages on, and American families are affected, including in their pocketbooks. At the start of 2023, the cost of illegal aliens crossing with Biden was over $150 billion. The burden of illegal aliens costs each American taxpayer nearly $1,200 annually. Corrupt Judd Merchant continues promoting the re-election of Donald Trump by relentlessly being bigoted and objectionable, earning an invitation as my guest for the Trump inauguration. The invitation was hand-delivered to the New York Merchant office Monday by South Carolina Attorney General Alan Wilson. The shameful bias and bigotry of Judge Merchant has been exposed this week by esteemed Harvard law professor Alan Dershowitz as, quote, unethical, unlawful, and petty, end of quote. In conclusion, God bless our troops who successfully protected America for 20 years in the global war on terrorism as it moves from the Afghanistan safe haven to America. We don't need new border laws. We need to enforce the existing laws. Biden shamefully opens borders for dictators as more 9/11 attacks across America are imminent, as repeatedly warned by the FBI.
For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Connecticut seek recognition? Without objection, the gentlewoman is recognized for 1 minute.
I rise today to recognize a specially crafted food that draws people from across the country to my hometown of New Haven, Connecticut. It is called abitz. After the original way, la pizza was pronounced in southern Italy. For more than a century, New Haven has been home to some of the most famous pizzerias in the country, known for everything from a plain sauce to white clam to mashed potato. And I proudly rise today to claim New Haven as the pizza capital of the United States. While there are other states that have their own pizza traditions, Connecticut has the most pizzerias of any state per capita and the most family-owned pizzerias of any state in the country. There's something special about New Haven abitz. Some say it is coal fire, some say brick ovens, some say it is char, some say it is the water used to make the dough. Personally, I believe it is the generation after generation of dedication to the craft. Historic pizzerias in New Haven area that continue this legacy include Frank Pepe, Pizzeria Napolitana, Modern Abizza, Zupardi's Abizza, Sally's Abizza, Ernie's Abizza, Yorkside Bar, Grand Abizza, and Zanelli and Abate Pizza, just to name a few. They have helped to establish a uniquely American culinary and cultural experience, making the New Haven one of the most respected and recognized pizza destinations in the country. And therefore, New Haven is recognized as the pizza capital of the United States. I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Georgia seek recognition?
Unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute, to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to celebrate the achievement of the girls soccer team at Frederica Academy with their back-to-back state title wins. The team defended their state title with a final score of 1-0 against the Westminster School of Augusta. The goal was scored by freshman Sophia Gregg, who outmaneuvered her defenders in the first half of the game. Gregg's goal was made possible by an assist from Mary Ford Fitzgerald. Frederica's strong defense was also able to hold off every shot attempt made at their goal. This win allowed them to go undefeated in the Georgia Independent Athletic Association AAA District 2 region, making them the #1 ranked team in the region. Congratulations to the young women of the Frederica Academy soccer team. I know I speak for the whole 1st District when I say we are very proud of you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Michigan seek recognition? Without objection, the gentlewoman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to highlight an extraordinary initiative in the heart of Michigan's 11th District. Project Diamond, a groundbreaking program spearheaded by Troy's Automation Alley and the Oakland County Economic Development Office. This project encapsulates not just the spirit of innovation, but also the determination of our local communities and our industrious small to mid-size manufacturers. Project Diamond is revolutionizing additive manufacturing with 3D printing, positioning Michigan as a global leader, and delivering 250 3D printers to empower manufacturers in the automotive, aerospace, and defense sectors. This technology allows rapid prototyping, reduces lead times, and integrates seamlessly into existing supply chains, advancing our national manufacturing agenda. Mr. Speaker, as we look to future-proof our industries, let us support and expand initiatives like Project Diamond. Thank you, and I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Ohio seek recognition?
I seek unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute and to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to celebrate the incredible success of the Cincinnati St. Xavier High School swimming and diving team and to congratulate them on winning their 44th state championship. The dedication and hard work of these talented athletes is second to none, as they have claimed 24 of the last 26 state championships, 4 of the last 5, and 44 out of the last 54. The St. Xavier Swim and Dive team, the Bombers, or Aqua Bombers as they are also known, won their most recent championship with a score of 302 points, beating out the runners-up by 73 points. The Bombers were led by Ohio 2nd District native Max Ward, who brought home first-place finishes in the 100-meter butterfly and the 200-meter freestyle. As a member of the St. Xavier Long Blue Line and a swimmer alum, I want to congratulate the talented swimmers, divers, and coaches on this incredible feat. If they made it look easy, it's because it wasn't. Go Bombers. Mr. Speaker, I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Ohio seek recognition? Without objection, the gentlewoman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to share the inspiring story of Antrone Juice Williams, a remarkable individual from Lucas County, Ohio. I had the pleasure of meeting Mr. Williams 2 years ago, and since then his journey has been nothing short of extraordinary. Antrone is not just a dedicated athlete with the Special Olympics Lucas County Lightning, but also a relentless advocate for his community. As the former president of the Central Residential Advisory Board, he tirelessly represented over 11,000 residents in Lucas metropolitan housing. His entrepreneurial spirit led him to Ivy Entrepreneurial Business School, where he rose to new heights, becoming the CEO and founder of the HOW Inc. Foundation, helping others win. Antrone's achievements are vast, but perhaps most notable is his pioneering accomplishment as the first physically challenged man to become an independent provider. Antrone's story is a beacon of hope for those living with physical challenges. His story is a powerful reminder that our circumstances do not define us. Our spirit and determination do. Onward, Antrone. We are so proud of you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from New York seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute and to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, today I rise to remember the life of a true American hero, Mark Woods, who dedicated his life to public service in the military, in law enforcement, and in his local community. A two-term U.S. Army combat veteran and a retired NYPD detective who served on the Joint Terror Task Force, Mark lived a life of service from the start. His passion for supporting fellow veterans through his role as director of the Joseph P. Dwyer Peer-to-Peer Veteran Service Program at Bridges and as a veteran service officer in Rockland County was revered by all in our region. Mark was rightly recognized as Rockland County's 2024 Veteran of the Year thanks to his unparalleled efforts advocating for veterans and getting them the support and services they need and deserve. Beyond his work for the veterans community, Mark was a councilman in the town of Clarkstown and a dedicated family man. We extend our deepest sympathies to his family, especially his wife Jeannie and his son and daughter, who should know that Mark's legacy will continue to inspire and guide all of us. On a more personal note, Mark was a great friend who I was honored to swear in as councilman in January, and I will miss him dearly. He was a humble and decent man whose work was rooted in service to the people of Rockland County. May God rest his soul, and on behalf of a grateful nation, Mr. Speaker, I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Oregon seek recognition?
I seek unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute and to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentlewoman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today as the daughter of a Vietnam veteran and the representative for Oregon's 6th District, home to nearly 40,000 veterans. These brave Oregonians served our country, and now I have the great honor of serving them in Congress. They're hardworking people, some of whom carry with them scars, both visible and invisible, of their service. Returning to civilian life can be challenging. Mental health problems are all too common, and many veterans struggle to find stable jobs and housing. They put country first and their own comfort second. As members of Congress, the least we can do is to show them we care. That's why I was shocked to see House Republicans proposing $30 billion in cuts to SNAP in their Farm Bill proposal. Cutting SNAP was never on the table for Democrats. Yet my Republican colleagues have chosen to move forward with this reckless plan and take away up to 2 days' worth of food every month from hungry veterans, kids, and seniors. Why must my Republican colleagues deprive veterans of food when they fall on hard times? Why the unnecessary cruelty? Instead, we need to protect SNAP and ensure that those who have sacrificed so much for our freedom will have the healthy, nutritious food on the table. It's our job, no, our duty and responsibility to pay them back. I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Indiana seek recognition? Without objection, the gentlewoman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to recognize Sergeant Roy Springfield of Anderson, Indiana, who served in the U.S. Army for 3 years as a member of the elite special forces. Roy enlisted in the Army in 1961, where he completed his tour of duty in Vietnam and Laos. While evacuated in Special Forces base in Laos under intense enemy attack, Sergeant Springfield managed to grab an American flag and keep it from falling into enemy hands. He has retained and treasured this flag for more than 6 decades. After his time in the Army, Roy went on to service his community for 27 years as a police officer with the Anderson Police Department. In 1973, he also started the Police Athletic League in Anderson for disadvantaged youth. In recognition of his brave service to our nation, it was my honor to represent Sergeant Roy Springfield with the National Defense Service Medal and the Armed Forces Expeditionary Medal in January 26, 2024. I am extremely grateful for Roy's bravery and humbled to express our appreciation on behalf of the American people in Indiana 5th Congressional District. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield back.
Under the Speaker's announced policy of January 9, 2023, the gentlewoman from Connecticut, Mrs. Hayes, is recognized for 60 minutes as the designee of the Minority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I ask unanimous consent that members have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend their remarks and to submit extraneous materials into the record on the topic of this special order.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And thank you to my colleagues who have joined me for this extremely important SNAP Special Order Hour. Hunger continues to be a pervasive issue in America. According to the USDA, in 2023, over 42 million people rely on the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, also known as SNAP, and 41% of those households have children. SNAP benefits are modest, averaging only about $6.20 per person per day, or about $2 per person per meal. SNAP benefits average only $6.20 per person per day, or about $2 per person per meal. The benefits of SNAP are highly targeted to focus on those with the greatest needs. 92% of SNAP benefits go to households with income below the poverty line, and 54% go to households at or below half of the poverty line. Additionally, every dollar spent on SNAP benefits generates as much as $1.54 to the local economy. House Republicans are putting forward a farm bill which would end the USDA's authority to increase the Thrifty Food Plan. The Thrifty Food Plan is used to determine the amount of benefits a SNAP recipient receives. USDA calculates the Thrifty Food Plan using a mathematical model based on the cost of food, the nutrients in the food, nutrition guidance, and what Americans are actually eating. The Thrifty Food Plan goes further than a simple adjustment for inflation to better ensure that people have access to food. The 2018 bipartisan farm bill directed USDA to regularly reevaluate the Thrifty Food Plan and SNAP benefit adjustments as food prices, dietary guidance, and other scientific standards shifted over time. The farm bill put forth by House Republicans would result in roughly $30 billion in benefit cuts, according to the Congressional Budget Office. That would impact every SNAP household in future years, including children, older adults, and people with disabilities. It would mean that the cost of the Thrifty Food Plan would be frozen, no matter what the science says about the cost of a healthy, normal diet. In the last 50 years, the Thrifty Food Plan has only been updated 3 times, in 1983, 1989, and 2006. But these updates did not increase SNAP benefits. As a result of the 2021 update, the benefits amounts were increased and the purchasing power of the plan to 21%. This led to $1.40 per person per day increase in SNAP's average benefits, or about 70 cents per meal. This is not a lot of money to begin with. However, this update lifted over 2 million SNAP participants out of poverty or above the poverty line, including over 1 million children. According to the Urban Institute, the 2021 Thrifty Food Plan reduced poverty for Black and Hispanic people, suggesting that reevaluation was addressing long-standing systemic racial issues. Additionally, a 2023 Data for Progress poll found that 66% have a favorable view of SNAP, including 83% of Democrats, 62% of independents, and 52% of Republicans. All Americans benefit from this anti-hunger program. A majority of Americans support increasing funding for SNAP, not cutting it. The total cut to SNAP and related nutrition programs under the House Republican proposal is roughly $30 billion. The average per person SNAP benefit would be roughly $7 less per month between 2027 and 2031 and jump to $15 less per month in 2032 and 2033. According to the budget and policy priorities, this cut would affect nearly 6 million older adults, 4 million people with disability, and nearly 17 million children, including 5 million children under the age of 5. Hunger is a policy choice, and SNAP is our most effective anti-hunger program, and we must protect the Thrifty Food Plan in the Farm Bill. Thank you. Additionally, I would like to submit 4 letters into the record in opposition of the House Republican Farm Bill from the American Federation of Teachers, the National Education Association, AFL-CIO, and AFSCME. All letters disapprove of the nearly $30 billion cut to SNAP. Thank you. And with that, I would yield 2 minutes to the gentlelady from Ohio, Ms. Brown.
Thank you. I'd like to thank Rep. Hayes for organizing the special order hour on SNAP. Today I rise because tomorrow the House Ag Committee will vote on the GOP's partisan farm bill. If passed, it will force severe cuts to the SNAP program that would risk benefits for years to come. SNAP, the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, formerly known as food stamps, is a vital resource to families and individuals who have fallen on hard times. In Ohio's 11th Congressional District, almost 1 in 4 households rely on SNAP benefits to put food on the table. These are our friends, our family, neighbors, and my constituents. It shouldn't be controversial to want members of your community fed. On the House Ag Committee, I am committed to making that known, but this farm bill will see the largest cut to SNAP benefits in over 30 years, taking nearly $30 billion in food out of the mouths of people who really need it. Being poor isn't a condemnation of morals, but Republicans have shown they want to treat it that way, which is why I urge my Republican colleagues to reconsider their extreme proposal and to join Democrats as we continue to put people over politics. And with that, I yield back.
Thank you. I now recognize the gentlelady from Pennsylvania, Representative Wild, for 3 minutes.
Thank you. I'm grateful to the gentlelady from Connecticut for convening us this evening to discuss an issue that affects every corner of our nation, food insecurity. In blue, red, and purple districts alike, too many families struggle to afford the food that they need to keep themselves and their families healthy and fed. Throughout my time in Congress, I have used my voice and my vote to support nutrition programs because I am determined to ensure that in our nation, the richest in the history of the world, no one goes hungry. As part of this effort, I have prioritized key nutrition programs. In 2018, my very first vote was to reauthorize the Farm Bill, which funds many critical nutrition assistance programs that people in our community rely on. These programs include the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, known as SNAP, Meals on Wheels, Women, Infants, and Children, nutrition assistance, school breakfast programs, and summer meal programs. Now, extreme members of the House have put forward a farm bill that includes devastating cuts for SNAP participants that so many in our community rely on to feed their families. Their proposed bill would cut nearly $30 billion in SNAP benefits that families rely on to put food on the table every night. In 2023, 1 in 8 households, roughly 44.2 million Americans, experience food insecurity or lack of access to an affordable, nutritious diet. In my district, Pennsylvania 7, the greater Lehigh Valley area, nearly 40,000 households, or 13% of the households in our community, rely on SNAP to feed themselves and their families. In the richest nation in the world, no one should go to bed hungry because they can't afford to eat. And no one should have to worry about having enough food for their kids because politicians decided to play games with the necessary benefits that they rely on every single day. This is a moral imperative of the highest priority. Children's physical and cognitive development depends on proper nutrition. Quite simply, adequate food sets them up for success in school and throughout life. We must not abandon families in our communities that struggle with food insecurity. This should not be a partisan issue, and it is deeply disappointing to me that members on the other side of the aisle would put forth a bill that so severely cuts SNAP benefits. I will always stand up to efforts to strip benefits away from the most vulnerable members of our society, children. And I hope to work with my colleagues on both sides of the aisle on a bipartisan path forward that protects critical nutrition programs, including SNAP, in the upcoming Farm Bill reauthorization. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield back.
Thank you, Representative Wild, for those powerful words. I now recognize the gentlelady from Illinois, Representative Chakowski, for 2 minutes.
Let me thank my colleague, Congresswoman Hayes, for bringing us together today to talk about something so important. We do live in the richest country in the world at the richest moment in history. And the very idea that we would tolerate and even think about adding to hunger in America is beyond belief. It is a moral issue, but it is also, how could we even think about cutting the opportunity for our children, for our families, for older Americans, for people with disabilities, for people who simply can't afford to put food on the table? This is not because we have a shortage of the food that is available. It is not because there is not the funding to make sure that we take care of those in need. This is the beginning, pretty soon, of the hunger season, I say, because many schools now that have provided school lunch programs, school breakfast programs, may not be working at that in the months to come over the summer. And yet these children and families need to eat. And so I just say, how can anyone think about cutting the SNAP program? 60 million people in the United States, half of whom are children. No, it is just not tolerable. And so I just beg that we are going to make sure that everyone in the United States of America who is hungry will have food on the table, and I yield back. Thank you.
Thank you. I now recognize the gentleman from California, Representative Vargas, for 2 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, I sincerely thank the gentlewoman from Connecticut for bringing us together tonight to defend the SNAP program. In America, no child should go to bed hungry. No family should have to worry about where their next meal is coming from. SNAP is the most important and effective tool we have to stave off hunger in our country. It is our first line of defense. And yet, House Republicans have proposed the largest cut to the program in decades. This is cruel, plain and simple. These proposed cuts stand to harm more than 40,000 families in my district, in California, and over 40 million families nationwide who benefit from this program. Almost 80% of the people who benefit from SNAP are children, seniors, people with disabilities, and veterans. SNAP also boosts our local economies. Every dollar spent on SNAP benefits generates roughly $1.50 in economic activity. For too many people in our country, making ends meet is a daily battle. Programs like SNAP are vital tools for ending hunger and helping those who are most in need. They provide Americans with help they need to find the footing in tough times and to make life better for themselves and their children. We should be expanding these programs, not cutting them. With that, I yield back. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to add 18 billion of the cuts would affect households with children, which in a typical month would include nearly 17 million children. And with that, I'd like to recognize the gentlelady from California, Representative Barragan, for 2 minutes.
Thank you to the gentlelady. I ask Americans, are you a disabled veteran that receives food assistance or SNAP? How about a part-time college student or single mom on SNAP? Know that House Republicans are coming after your food benefits. House Republicans' Farm Bill would make the largest cut to SNAP in food assistance program in 30 years. Many American families are on the brink. They rely on SNAP to put food on the table. 86% of all SNAP benefits go to households that have children, or households with older Americans, or individuals with disabilities. As chair of the Congressional Hispanic Caucus, I'm also concerned about the harm SNAP cuts will bring to communities of color, including Latinos. 40% of Latino adults report not having enough food to eat, more than any other ethnic or racial group. Over 5 million Latinos in the United States receive SNAP to put food on the table. Right now, a single person will receive at most $9 in SNAP assistance for food per day. To those in need, $9 can determine whether they can eat that day. 3 square meals a day should not be a partisan debate. Without SNAP, hungry Americans will be forced to choose between food to eat and necessities like electricity, running water, or medication. It's a cruel and inhumane choice we should not force on the American people. House Democrats will continue to fight to preserve and expand access to SNAP so that no family goes hungry. I urge my Republican colleagues to put people over politics and join House Democrats to protect SNAP. We must stand together for compassion, dignity, and the well-being of all Americans. Thank you, and I yield back.
Thank you. I'd like to add into the record that $9 billion of the cuts would affect households with preschool-age children or children under 5, which in a typical month would include about 5 million young children. I now recognize the gentlelady from Michigan, Representative to leave.
Thank you so much for my wonderful, amazing, dedicated, committed colleague from Connecticut who is today, as we say in Detroit, speaking truth to power when it comes to our most vulnerable in the United States. We've heard it over and over again, but we are in the richest country in the world. Millions of children, even though we live in the richest country, millions of children live in poverty, lacking access to necessities like food, housing, and health care. It's shameful. More than 44 million people in our country face hunger, including over 15% in one of the largest counties in my district, Wayne County. SNAP is essential food assistance program that has been a key tool in combating hunger in our most vulnerable communities. Now, my Republican colleagues want to cut this essential program that so many of our families rely on to feed their children. Shameful. The GOP Farm Bill would make the largest cut to SNAP in nearly 30 years. The bill threatens $27 billion in SNAP benefits for low-income families. It's utterly shameful. We must stand together strongly in support of expanding the social safety net and increasing funding programs like for SNAP and other child nutrition programs. These are essential in creating healthy, thriving communities. It is time to protect programs to combat hunger, not make extremist cuts. Working families in our country should not have to worry about where their next meal is coming from. In this body, we see it over and over again that we seem to find money for endless wars like this, but we can't seem to find the same resources to end child hunger in our country. You know, the first African-American woman ever to serve in a Congress was Shirley Chisholm, and she used to say, children can't learn if they're hungry. Well, children should and must have access to SNAP benefits to experience long-term positive outcomes like better health, improved learning, and higher success as adults. I don't think people realize the trauma of what people in our most vulnerable, and it's just not only our children, but our most vulnerable among us, the trauma they go through in going to sleep hungry. Access to nutrition meals is essential for every child's health and development. We know this. So why make these extremist cuts? We must continue to invest in universal school meals and so much more. I'm proud to co-sponsor the Universal Schools Meals Program and proud to say to all of my folks in the 12th Congressional District, I'm not going to back down. I'm not going to back down until we fully fund the SNAP benefits. It's the least we can do, Mr. Speaker, in this Congress. It's not just our children. It's our disabled neighbors. It's our seasoned residents. It's our veterans, working class, folks that are working hours and hours a day and still can't put food on the table. We must do better. Thank you again to my colleague in Connecticut for bringing us together today to discuss the importance of protecting SNAP. I yield.
Thank you. $5 billion of the cuts will affect older adults. That would affect households which means in a typical month, that would include more than 6 million individuals age 60 or older whose benefits would be cut. I now recognize the gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Jackson, for 4 minutes.
Thank you, the Honorable Congresswoman Jahana Hayes from the great state of Connecticut. Mr. Speaker, I rise because it is an imperative that this body move with all deliberate speed to pass a farm bill that is both responsible and enriching for the American people. The Farm Bill is one of the most fundamental pieces of legislation that we enact as a government, and not simply because of the dollars we dedicate, but more so because of the amount of people who are supported by the passing of this indispensable law. Unlike most of the bills we pass, the Farm Bill is not a dry and depersonalized legislative act. There are names and faces attached to food. There are real people in dire situations associated and connected to the success of this bill. Unlike most of the appropriations we allocate in this body, the Farm Bill is a moral document that reminds us that we owe each other as human beings. It brings us back to the fundamental things. It reminds us that politics of the future means nothing in the stomach of a child who is hungry. And to be sure, this bill compels us to move forward. This bill moves us beyond politics of blame so that we might embrace a more excellent way. In fact, I would go so far as to say that the Farm Bill is one of the few manifestations of the social contract this government makes with the American people. The SNAP program alone is a moral accomplishment that we have to reach for. Over 300,000 people make up my district in Illinois. Almost 73,000 of those households receive SNAP benefits. Almost 40% of these households have a child in them, and almost 45% of those children have some sort of disability. In fact, I would go so far as to say that the bill is one of the few manifestations of the social contract of this government that the American people deserve. The SNAP program alone is our moral achievement. And I say this because all of us know that 86% of the SNAP benefits go to the household of women and children. Mr. Speaker, we have to move with speed. Ask not what you can do for your country, but what your country can do for you. Let me tell you, there's a mutuality in this contract. We also have to understand that the state has to support the people, not simply the people, the state. The Farm Bill helps those that are in need when their backs are against the wall. Does this bill achieve that? No, Mr. Speaker. Taking food off of children's plates is not the best of the American ideal. We say our prayers, but we pray for the food we're about to receive. We do not pray for the food that has now been removed from our table by our government. We must indeed fight for the rights of all those women and children, disabled families that need our help. This is important because the time when we ignore cities and emerging farming centers is over. In the district that I represent, we celebrate community gardens and urban farms because in as much as I believe that access to healthy food is a right that all human beings should enjoy, it is also a responsibility that each of us must make and take into our own hands. Each of us must do whatever we can to ensure that our families have the sustenance and nutrition that require for flourishing and the possibility of a great life. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to say in closing, we need a farm bill that is responsible, taking food out of the mouths of the most desperate and those that are the least, the lost, and the left behind cannot stand. I will be opposing this farm bill until it is more responsive and we leave SNAP alone and ensure that every family is well fed in America. I yield back my time. I thank the Honorable Congresswoman Jahana Hayes for picking up this fight.
Thank you, Representative Jackson. We appreciate everything you said, and thank you for your words. I now recognize the gentleman from Mississippi and the chairman of the House Democratic Nutrition Task Force, Representative Thompson. Benny G. Thompson.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the gentleladies giving me some time. First of all, I'm one of those members who represent a significantly agricultural district who actually has its economy based on agriculture. I also represent the district that former Congressman Jamie Whitten represented, and ultimately he framed the Farm Bill in such that it did not pit rural America against urban America. This bill pits rural America against urban America, and that's not the purpose of a farm bill. And let's talk a little bit about it. You can't penalize the needy for the greedy. And what I'm saying in that respect is so many of people in this country are in need of nutrition benefits. That's why we have a farm bill. A substantial majority of the farm bill is devoted to nutrition, and rightfully so. So let's talk a little bit about where I am with it. Former Congressman, well, several Congresspeople. This is my fourth farm bill. I've gone through all of it. I've seen everything that's been had with it. But the important part is I serve as the chair of the 21st Century Agriculture and Nutrition Task Force, appointed by Leader Jeffries. We went all over the country. We heard from people saying, look, there are important things for the Farm Bill, but it's all about compromise and working together. So what did we hear people say? First thing they said, that food is medicine. If you're worried about health care in this country, if people don't have nutrition, that is a problem. Today, the cost of food is steadily rising, which means Americans cannot afford to purchase healthy, nutritious meals. In going around the country, there were a number of things that we heard from east, west, north, south. It said we must not eliminate the hot food ban for SNAP recipients. SNAP recipients should have the benefit of hot meals. We must address the hunger among college students. We should protect SNAP against harmful cuts to eligibility requirements. Now, you talk about eligibility requirements. Most people don't know that if you are on Social Security and Medicare, that counts against seniors' eligibility for SNAP benefits. But also in doing that and looking at it, our veterans are also penalized in the qualification for SNAP's benefits. But we also have those individuals who have made a mistake, they've come out, but they're ineligible for SNAP benefits. We always talk about second chance people. So why shouldn't formerly incarcerated people be eligible for food stamps? Those are things that we heard. But more importantly, this $30 billion cut, totally unreasonable. It makes no sense. And again, it puts and penalizes people over politics. I hope when this issue is taken up, Ms. Hayes, tomorrow, Democrats will stand firm in its opposition against it. If Republicans are genuinely interested in making this work, we can do that. But from the nutrition standpoint, don't penalize people who need help. The demonstration of their help is already here. I look forward, after this issue is defeated, coming back together, pulling people together, working through all the logistics, and not be cute about how we fund certain programs and defund other programs. Ms. Hayes, I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I just want to amplify the point that we have to have a farm bill that works for everyone. I often hear people say that we need a farm bill that represents farmers. I would challenge that we need a farm bill that represents everyone. Members often ask me, do you represent a farming community? And my response is, we all represent communities where people eat, and that has to be a part of the conversation as well. I now recognize the gentlewoman from Massachusetts, Representative Presley, for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Congresswoman Hayes. Before we began this special order hour, I approached Congresswoman Hayes to thank her for her leadership in pulling this together. And she said, "You're welcome, but I'm so sorry we have to do this at all. As am I, as are we all. Such a shame. But I thank you for your leadership and partnership in our fight to eradicate hunger and for convening us this evening." Mr. Speaker, I rise in solidarity with the over 50,000 SNAP beneficiaries in the Massachusetts 7th Congressional District, as well as the 41 million plus across our country. Parents who choose to go hungry because there isn't enough to feed both themselves and their children. And they would rather make that sacrifice rather than threaten the cognitive development and nutrition that their children need to thrive, and certainly to support their readiness to learn. I rise in solidarity with those families who, given the high cost of housing and food, are struggling because incomes are not keeping pace. Mr. Speaker, food insecurity is on the rise, but it doesn't have to be. Congress should not advance a farm bill that cuts $30 billion in SNAP funding. Now, to be clear, we are not here due to a deficit of resources for SNAP. We are here due to a deficit of empathy. A deficit of empathy for those who are food insecure. A lack of empathy for our most vulnerable and marginalized neighbors. This Republican cut to our nation's largest nutrition program will disproportionately harm our seniors, veterans, children, adults with disabilities, and working families. In my home state of Massachusetts, this cut will impact 1 in 6 residents, over 1 million people. people who depend on SNAP to put healthy food on the table. That alarming statistic is worse for Black and Latino families who are twice as likely to face food insecurity. For decades, SNAP has been a critical tool in reducing hunger for low-income people, lifting millions out of poverty, and improving health and well-being. To make it plain, food is medicine. Food is life. We should not tolerate the suffering of our neighbors as they live in anxiety and fear, wondering where their next meal will come from. Republicans need to stop playing with people's lives. Hunger is a humanitarian crisis, a moral failing, and a policy choice. I urge my colleagues to choose compassion and care over cruelty and callousness and support full funding of SNAP. Thank you. I yield.
Thank you, Representative Presley. And I would like to just add that children and some of our most vulnerable communities don't have lobbyists, but they do have members of Congress, and it is our job to make sure that we are actively working to improve their lives. With that, I recognize the gentlewoman from Minnesota, Representative Omar, for 1 minute.
Thank you so much, Representative Hayes, for your tireless effort. And yes, you are right. Children, the poor, the elderly, and the downtrodden do not have lobbyists, but they have us. Mr. Speaker, I rise in opposition to Chairman Thompson's partisan farm bill. Hunger is rising at an alarming rate among U.S. households. In Minnesota alone, over 500,000 people are facing hunger, including over 180,000 children. SNAP serves as the first line of defense against hunger for children, for the elderly, for veterans, for those who have disabilities. Yet last week, Republicans unveiled the largest cuts to SNAP in nearly 30 years. This extreme proposal would slash SNAP funding, which provides food benefits for low-income families, by approximately $30 billion over the next decade, impacting every participant. And instead of proposing this unacceptable policy, we should be passing My Universal School Meals program. We should be fully funding SNAP. We should be fully funding WIC. Enacting this bill without dramatic changes would push more people below the poverty line and exacerbate hunger. I urge my colleagues to reject this proposal and prioritize our constituents over making political points. And I yield back.
Thank you. I would also like to add that in 2023, 1.2 million veterans participated in the SNAP program. I really don't understand why in this Congress, whenever we have to make tough policy choices, these are the people that are always targeted. Last year, during the debt ceiling negotiations, the program that was targeted and cut was SNAP and nutrition programs. In September, when we went back for the appropriations budget, the program and the hard lines that were targeted were once again feeding and nutrition programs. When will this end? At this point, I recognize the gentlelady from Vermont, Representative Balint, for 2 minutes.
Thank you so much. You have been a champion on this issue, and I'm so glad you've convened us here tonight. Look, over 41 million Americans depend on nutrition assistance to feed themselves and their families. And SNAP benefits reach millions of rural Americans every day. No state, no community, no congressional district in our nation is immune to hunger and food insecurity. And paradoxically, in rural areas that grow most of our nation's food, many households face real struggles with hunger. It's not just in metropolitan areas. And we know poverty is the root cause of hunger, and it's often acute in rural communities, like in my home state of Vermont, with 15% of households in rural areas facing food insecurity. Millions of working families, veterans, people with disabilities, seniors, children in rural communities cannot always afford enough food to keep themselves and their families healthy. Simply put, too many Americans are going hungry every day. But we have a vital program that actually helps to address this problem, the SNAP program. It provides monthly benefits to low-income families and individuals to help them to buy food. Now, Republicans attack, and it's just the latest attack on this essential program, would slash the program by $30 billion over the next decade. If enacted, the bill would make the largest cuts to SNAP benefits in 30 years, at a time when we have gross wealth inequality in this country. Slashing anti-hunger programs that we know work is stupid. It's inhumane. And it's also short-sighted. Even if you don't think we have a moral responsibility to feed the children of this nation and make sure they don't go hungry every night, even if you don't think it's a moral imperative, which I do, but if you don't, there are real consequences for individual Americans and for our healthcare system. When Americans don't have enough food, this greatly impacts the health of those who go hungry. Food insecurity can lead to type 2 diabetes, high blood pressure, heart disease, obesity. The gentlewoman from Connecticut and I are both former teachers. We know children who go hungry struggle in school. They have health problems. Americans who are food insecure are more likely to struggle with psychological and behavioral health issues. This year's Farm Bill should be providing more benefits to Americans. We should be expanding and protecting SNAP benefits. Instead, what are we doing? Once again, demonizing the poor. It's time that House Republicans drop their partisan extremism and work alongside Democrats to pass a truly bipartisan farm bill and actually help feed the American people. I yield back.
Thank you, Representative Balint. As my colleague stated, she and I are both former educators, and I really wish that before members of Congress cast their vote on these cuts to programs like SNAP, that they were forced to sit in a classroom on a Tuesday morning after a long weekend and count the number of kids who had their heads down on their desks. I wish that members were forced to sit in a classroom on any given day as a kid said they had a headache, third period, and you realize it's because they haven't had breakfast. I wish that members of Congress were forced to stand with you at the after-school program when a kid hung behind and asked if they could take something home for their little brother who's been home all day and they know they haven't eaten. I wish every member of Congress and everyone in this chamber were forced to do that before these proposals were put into a bill like the Farm Bill and before members voted on these things. And with that, I recognize the gentlelady from Michigan, Representative Stevens, for 2 minutes.
Thank you to my good colleague, the gentlewoman from Connecticut. And I reflect on this Farm Bill from a standpoint that at this period in time, Americans are paying more of their earned income for food than they have in the last 30 years. Our president's FTC chair has notified us that grocery stores, big grocers, some food manufacturers, but mostly the grocers, are price gouging. If you are middle class, if you are poor, if you are trying to save for college for your kid, if you are trying to save up for an unexpected occurrence, food is squeezing the middle class and working families of this country. And we have a responsibility to pass a farm bill that addresses the needs of the hungry and addresses the needs of our middle class. We have got to get real. Because what we do is we say, oh, you know what, we're going to cap you at this income level. And if you're a single mom and you're raising your kid and you're $500 over that income level, you don't get the SNAP benefits. I am sick of this type of governance. I am sick of this type of means testing. We did this in the pandemic. It wasn't hard. Steve Mnuchin,
You know, he was able to give everybody a capped unemployment level. But when it comes to food, and you got a Democratic caucus over here fighting over and over and over again, free and reduced lunch in our schools. Thank you to the governor from Michigan for actually getting that done. We'd like to see that here in the United States of America. This is real stuff. And kids are going to school hungry, and kids are ashamed when they're carrying in those meal cards. And parents are worried. And so you know what we've got? We've got over $1 trillion of credit card debt because people can't go to the grocery store. They can't take their kids out to eat because it costs $50 for a family of 4. You can't get lunch for under 15. So what are we litigating here? You know, just filling the pockets of the grocers and the big business and the this and the that when we don't actually have a real North Star here in this chamber? Just one last fact. The maximum benefits of SNAP right now fell 19% short of covering basic meal costs. One study revealed that in 98% of counties, SNAP benefits did not cover the cost of a modestly priced meal. So we're not even meeting the bare minimum, my friends. We're not even doing the bare minimum. And the House Democrats are going to continue to stand up to this wrong-minded package that will not be serving the American people. Thank you.
Thank you. I can't help but reflect on the irony of us hearing every day about inflation and the rising costs of food and basic things that people need, while also proposing cuts to the most vulnerable people on an anti-hunger, anti-poverty program. I now recognize the newest member of our Democratic caucus, Representative Tim Kennedy, the gentleman from New York. You are recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you. I want to start by thanking Congresswoman Hayes for leading this effort. Mr. Speaker, on behalf of the 62,000 households in New York's 26th congressional district that rely on the SNAP program, I rise to urge my colleagues to oppose the changes in the Thrifty Food Program and the Farm Bill. In New York State alone, these cuts would result in the loss of $2 billion in SNAP benefits over 10 years and the loss of over $3.5 billion in total local economic activity. At a time when overall food insecurity in New York State has increased from 11.4% to 13.5%, and child food insecurity increased from 15.4% to 18.8%, the absolute last thing we should be doing is cutting SNAP benefits. These changes to the Thrifty Food Program will negatively impact benefit levels for summer EBT and funding for food banks. This is simply unacceptable. Instead, Congress should pass legislation to expand access to SNAP. That's why I co-sponsor the Enhance Access to SNAP Act, which would eliminate work for food requirements and expand benefits for millions of college students. In my district, our primary food bank, Feed More Western New York, has seen the need for food assistance in the community triple since the pandemic. And the number of people served today has already exceeded 10-year growth projections. As a nation, we have an obligation to eradicate hunger. This bill will do just the opposite. I urge my colleagues to oppose this legislation as written. I yield back.
Thank you. I now recognize the gentlelady from New Mexico and the leader on the Rules Committee, Representative Leger Fernandez.
Thank you.
For 3 minutes, I'm sorry. For 3 minutes.
Thank you so very much, Representative Hayes, for organizing and for giving me this time, because I am here on behalf of my good friend and the ranking member of the Rules Committee, Jim McGovern, who Republicans silenced today for simply telling the truth about a criminal trial. Imagine that. On this House floor, we cannot state a fact about a trial. Here is another fact about the former president that represents a policy choice Democrats oppose. President Trump supported cutting SNAP by nearly 30% within 10 years. Mr. McGovern stands for the opposite. He stands up every week on this House floor with this poster, "End Hunger Now." If Republicans hadn't silenced him, he would have spoken tonight against the Farm Bill because of its impact on farmers. If Republicans hadn't silenced him, he would have spoken up for families who do not have enough food to eat. Similar to me, Mr. McGovern represents a district that includes thousands of farms and farmers who benefit from SNAP because they sell their produce into the program, but also farmers need to use SNAP because they don't make enough money. So we are starving the people who are raising the food for us. Mr. McGovern, like me, represents a district where, in my district, actually, 1 in 5 New Mexicans received SNAP benefits, the highest of any state. This Republican majority silenced him. So I'm here to read the remarks that the Republican majority might not want to hear from Mr. McGovern. These are his remarks. Mr. Speaker, Republicans are advancing a bill that cuts SNAP, our nation's first line of defense against hunger, by an astounding $30 million. He would have probably raised his hands and said, "You can't make this up." MAGA Republicans included a provision in their extremely partisan farm bill that will prevent SNAP benefits from ever being increased, even if a scientific review says they should be. The last reevaluation in 2021, which was the first update in 50 years, gave families an extra, wait for it, $1.40 per person per day to purchase food. That extra help has meant families can access more nutritious food. It has meant fewer skipped meals. It has meant better food security. Mr. Speaker, I urge all of my colleagues to oppose this MAGA Republican farm bill, which would cut future benefits and increase hunger for kids, seniors, people with disabilities, and other vulnerable adults. Those are Jim McGovern's remarks. While House Republicans silenced him today, they will never silence the truth that he speaks. We must end hunger now. We must answer the call. When I was hungry, you gave me to eat. When I was thirsty, you gave me to drink. Thank you, Representative Jahana Hayes, for your advocacy in bringing us together to heed this call.
Thank you. I now recognize the gentleman from New York, Representative Goldman, for 2 minutes.
Thank you very much to my colleague from Connecticut. I rise today alongside so many of my colleagues to make one thing very clear. Republicans' proposed funding cuts to SNAP are unconscionable and will send millions into poverty and food insecurity. SNAP is an essential lifeline that working families across America rely on to put food on the table. In New York City alone, where I come from, more than 1.7 million people rely on SNAP benefits to help them feed their families. Nationwide, there are more than 41 million SNAP recipients. According to the Center for Budget and Policy Priorities, 92% of SNAP benefits go to households with income below the poverty line, and a shocking 54% go to households at or below half of the poverty line. So it begs the question, what do my colleagues on the other side of the aisle have against working families doing their best to succeed? Do you not care if our children go without food? It is just simply unacceptable. Food is a basic necessity. In the wealthiest country in the world, it should not even be a question whether our government is going to make sure that everyone, especially innocent children, have basic necessities. Our budgets show where our priorities lie. So let's reverse these draconian cuts to SNAP. Let's not cut taxes on the wealthy, And let's put our families and our children first. Thank you, and I yield back.
Thank you. I'd like to take a moment to thank all of my colleagues who participated in tonight's SNAP special order. And I'd like to just close by saying that these cuts will affect summer EBT, which is how most families feed their children over the summer, by $500 million in this Farm Bill. I'm not really sure if there's a full appreciation of who is affected by these cuts. I've been very transparent about my story in the fact that I grew up in a household that received food stamps. As a young college student and a single mom, I was working 2 jobs, attending community college, and still qualified for benefits. I promise you that my story is the same as every single member of Congress, a constituent in the district of every single member of Congress who just wants a shot, who just wants a chance at raising their children with dignity, who just wants a chance at moving their family from poverty into being contributors to society. Every single one of you has someone in your district just like me. Hundreds of families going through the same thing. Working families that'll be affected by the $11 billion in cuts that would affect their household and their earnings. I urge my Republican colleagues to rethink these proposals, to come back to the table and let us work on a bipartisan farm bill that helps everybody in America. Of all the things that we can say that we've done, I don't want taking food out of the mouths of children to be one of them. Tomorrow, we'll go into a markup on this farm bill, and we will review it title by title. There are 12 titles. The Thrifty Food Plan, which is what much of us have spoken about tonight, which is the mathematical system by which benefits are evaluated and based upon, was moved from Title IV, which is the nutrition title, to Title 12, miscellaneous and others. Nutrition is not miscellaneous. It is something that should be a priority in this country. It is something that we have the ability to do. Once again, it is a policy choice. I held out until I saw the text because I prayed about it and I hoped and I wished that the cuts were not as bad as I had read about in the papers and heard talk about, but they are. $30 billion in cuts are devastating to a program that is the most effective anti-hunger program that we have. I urge my colleagues to really consider their votes on this farm bill and the impact that it'll have on children and families. And with that, I yield back.
Under the Speaker's announced policy of January 9th, 2023, the gentleman from Utah, Mr. Moore, is recognized for 60 minutes as the designee of the Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I ask unanimous consent that all members may have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend their remarks and include extraneous material on the topic of this special order.
Without objection.
Thank you. Today, House Republicans this week, in fact, are advocating for the American people and protecting them from bureaucratic overreach. We are pushing legislation that will protect Americans' right to financial privacy and create a regulatory framework for digital asset markets so American industries can thrive. I'm grateful to the Financial Services and Agriculture Committees for prioritizing this important issue, and I am grateful to have my friend and colleague from Arkansas here to share more about his work on this. I think one interesting element to this is we had a very strong approach and bill on this regulatory framework with regarding these various digital assets, and we garnered an incredibly strong bipartisan vote today. That I think it's important to recognize this is not a messaging bill in any way, shape, or form. We are trying to make sure we do the thing that we are elected to do, and that is take care of this type of very important work legislatively and not cede this power to the bureaucratic state and the regulators. That's something that we accomplished here and we're accomplishing this week, and it's incredibly important to recognize that we're doing this through legislation and not just through an administrative state. And with that, I look forward to hearing from an authority on this, the gentleman from Arkansas, Mr. Hill.
Well, I thank my friend from Utah for sharing some of the time tonight to talk to the American people about some of the important priorities that House Republicans have put on the floor for consideration in this House this week. House Republicans believe strongly that capital formation, jobs, careers, and opportunities are essential to economic growth in our nation. And look, America's economic growth leads the world right now. We're so blessed to have relatively low unemployment and ample work, but we're also leading in technology. And that's at the heart of what House Republicans have had on the floor today. First, let's talk about the internet. What has been more forceful in our lives, all of our lives, for the past 3 decades? The internet. And back in 1996, in this chamber, in this House, former Congressman Chris Cox of Southern California, later a SEC chairman, Securities and Exchange Commission chairman, Chris Cox was on this floor and he said, you know, we should not try to regulate or tax the internet. The internet is just a computer program. It's a computer platform. Let's tax and regulate the kinds of activity that take place on the internet. And so this House took the decision, the Senate joined them, to leave the internet as an open platform for collaboration. Think about that in the last 3 decades. If we'd not had the Telecommunications Act of 1996 and that resolution to not over-regulate and hamstring the internet by federal intervention, you wouldn't have the smartphone technology in your pocket. You would not be shopping and having your dog food come to your house delivered every month. It's been amazing to see what the protocols written on the internet as an open source technology benefited our country. So after email, it allowed us to set up our own marketing platforms on the internet, so-called Web 2, where we set up websites, we had interactivity with our customers, we sold products, we served as products, we took payments. And now it's time for people to have an opportunity to write applications on a blockchain, what we call Web 3. We want to own our own data. We don't want our data to be owned by Google or by Facebook or by big tech. Ideally, we'd like to own our own data, have our own data privacy, and all that is made easier and more effective by writing applications on a blockchain. And so today in the House, we had a big vote. We have 435 members here in the House. 279 members voted in favor of the Republicans' proposal for a regulatory framework for digital asset technology. This is setting up the regulatory framework that if you want to write an application on blockchain and you want to raise money around that, do venture capital effectively, right now there are no rules of the road for that. Zero. There's a regulatory gap. And that regulatory gap is in the purview of the Securities and Exchange Commission. Right now we have people who want to do Web3 applications. They want to write programs for blockchain. They want to raise money for that and have that technology expand. But they're stymied by the existing laws and regulations of the Securities and Exchange Commission. So our Fit for Purpose Act that we passed today by an overwhelmingly bipartisan vote sets up that framework. It directs the SEC and it directs the Commodities Future Trading Commission what to do, how to have the right laws, the right regulations so that people can trade digital assets. Like Bitcoin is a digital commodity, it's a cryptocurrency, but this affects, as I say, the future of technology and developing new forms of financial services that will lower costs for consumers, give people more choice, let people own their own data, have greater privacy, have less intrusion from big tech, own more of what they create, get paid for sharing what they create, and all that, in my judgment, is at the heart of Web 3, of the internet development, and the bill today supported overwhelmingly by the Republicans and 71 Democrats that joined us for a total vote of 279 votes on this House floor, mean that once again, there's a bipartisan consensus that we want America to lead in technology. It's just like that bipartisan consensus back in the 1990s, led by Chris Cox, so long ago, that gave us the ability to have competitive new technology for cellular telephones and for an open internet so that we could creatively use it to build our businesses. So I want to thank some people that have helped make this a success over the past year and a half working on this. G.T. Thompson of Pennsylvania, the chairman of the House Agriculture Committee. Patrick McHenry, the chairman of the House Foreign Financial Services Committee. If we didn't have Patrick and G.T.'s leadership, this wouldn't have been a priority in this House floor. Working with Majority Leader Steve Scalise, Speaker Mike Johnson, it became a priority for this House. So my hat's off to Chair McHenry, Chair Thompson for their leadership. It may sound like a small thing when you don't work here, but to see two large authorizing committees of the U.S. House of Representatives, Agriculture and Financial Services, working seamlessly together, it's a big deal. And they produced this bill, and I was proud to work on it with them, with my colleague on the Ag Committee, who does digital assets on the Agriculture Committee, Dusty Johnson of South Dakota. So the four of us led this effort, but we had help from our whip, Tom Emmer of Minnesota, and Warren Davidson, who have been leaders in decentralized finance and fintech and blockchain for years, long before this bill came to the floor. They were essential to that effort. And now for my friends on the other side of the aisle, Jim Himes of Connecticut, Richie Torres of New York, Josh Gottheimer of New Jersey, Brittany Peterson of Colorado, Ms. Corveo of Colorado. These were outstanding leaders on the Democratic side of the aisle who worked tirelessly with Republicans to draft this law to convince the American people that we do work together on this House floor. We do put America first. We do put American leadership and technology first. And a vote of 279, as I say, is a big vote on the House on a bipartisan priority to set the right course for a regulatory framework for digital assets. Who benefits? Consumers, investors, inventors, people who want to create new ways for you and I to do financial services, do health care together on a blockchain. So I think this is an exciting prospect. I think it was an important step for the House. The second bill that we'll be debating tomorrow is also led by Republicans, and it again says that the private sector should lead, not the public sector, not big government when it comes to digital payments. Many in the Democratic Party support something called a central bank digital currency, where you would actually end up banking at the Federal Reserve Bank. And your lack of privacy, your private information could be compromised because you'd be embedded in this large digital payment system called a central bank digital currency. Republicans are opposed to that. We prefer the private sector innovate in payments. As you see today in your own life, Venmo, Zelle, peer-to-peer payments, those are products of the private sector. Writing a check, product of the private sector. Making a debit card payment, a credit card payment, a product of the private sector. So we believe that's also the case when it comes to a tokenized payment stablecoin. We believe that should be a product of the private sector and not of the Federal Reserve or the central government. And so tomorrow you'll see House Republicans come to this floor and say that we do not want this administration or any administration to move forward with a central bank digital currency without a direct authorization of the Congress. Because we believe, as I say, so strongly in the private sector leading the way in payments and in the innovation for blockchain technology. will probably come to this House floor later in the year with a private sector-driven payment stablecoin bill led by Mr. McHenry of North Carolina. So, my friend from Utah, I want to say that those are some of the highlights today that I think show that on a bipartisan basis, Republicans are leading in technology in this House. And with that, let me yield back to my friend for a moment so that I can get a drink of water. Absolutely. And then I have a couple more things I'll say, and then I'll yield back to the gentleman.
We are here for you, sir. I will echo, we've got some comments on much of the financial services packages that we're putting on the floor this week. But your comments, this was a big deal. I would hope that folks could recognize that we're at a time where it's unknown. There's no rules in place for this innovation that's taking place in the financial market. And there has to be. It's good for every American, and it's good for our economy, and it's good for our industries to be able to have that structure, and we're putting that forward today. The big deal about this is, this is something that should pass as soon as it goes over to the Senate. It has got strong bipartisan support, and folks can recognize the importance of this moment, and House Republicans are leading to make that happen, to make that possible. We're not just again engaging in messaging bills on this type of stuff. This is legitimate, and it had a really, really strong vote today. Not as strong, I might mention, from my committee on the Ways and Means with the tax package, but this isn't a competition. It's not a competition. And I would like to yield back to Mr. Hill as he addresses the House for whatever time he may consume again.
Thank you. Well, I thank my friend from Utah, and I think that's an important comment, that this vote of 279 sends a strong message to the Senate that this House has done their homework. This House is prepared to advance technology that protects consumers, offers opportunities for investors, lets America lead, brings capital back to the United States that has left the U.S. due to the uncertainty and lack of leadership from the Securities Exchange Commission and the lack of authority in the Commodity Future Trading Commission. So I hope that this is a sign that we can work together with our friends in the Senate and that we can make law in this financial technology advance, and as you say, not just have a messaging bill. Mr. Speaker, small business is at the heart of each of our communities, and I wanted to rise today to recognize the efforts of a good friend, a great entrepreneur, and one of my constituents, Julie Goodnight, and her bakery, Julie's Sweet Shop in Conway, Arkansas. Julie began her career in the bakery industry at the age of 17, and she worked for her father's bakery, Ed's. As the granddaughter of two World War II vets, Julie loved how her father's shop provided a place for local veterans to meet, share their stories over a cup of coffee and a donut. Beginning at Ed's in the 1990s, Julie worked to honor these local heroes by celebrating them with an annual Veterans Day event. And when Julie finally got that amazing opportunity that every American entrepreneur dreams of, opening her own shop on Veterans Day in 2013, she continued this amazing family tradition. Since its founding, Julie's Sweet Shop has honored over 1,000 local veterans at its annual Veterans Day celebration. I've had the honor of attending every Veterans Day event at Julie's, and I've seen firsthand the impact she makes on our community. I want to thank Julie's Sweet Shop for their outstanding service to our veterans in Central Arkansas and to wish them continued success in all of their endeavors. Mr. Speaker, I rise today to congratulate the Syrian Emergency Task Force, a nonprofit based in Central Arkansas. In May, the University of Central Arkansas awarded the SETF with the 2024 Community Partner of the Year Award for their work to relieve the suffering of those in Syria from Bashar al-Assad's deadly regime. In 2011, the Syrian Emergency Task Force was created in response to the Syrian government's war on its own citizens, many of the targets of which were innocent kids. It was called the Syrian Emergency Task Force because they thought it would be a short-term emergency in 2011. Here we are a decade later, and they're still hard at work on behalf of ordinary people in Syria. Last summer, I was honored to visit the beautiful children at SETF's sponsored school for orphans, the Wisdom House, in northwest Syria. While there, I heard devastating stories from these children who have endured and continue to endure continuous bombardment by the Assad regime, their Russian or Iranian co-conspirators, resulting in more orphans on the street and more families displaced. Under UCA graduate and SETF Executive Director Muaz Mustafa's leadership, SETF works with those in the region and beyond to bring the voices of the Syrian people to the international stage. They are determined to create a safe and free Syria away from the Assad dictatorship. And I want to say thank you to President Davis and many other leaders at the University of Central Arkansas for their support of SETF and their support of the organization's efforts to make a difference in the lives of the Syrian people suffering at the hand of Assad's barbarism. The SETF is more than deserving of this award, and I'm proud to continue to work alongside of them in Congress in combating the Assad regime and being a strong advocate for helping the innocent people regain their freedom, regain their country. Mr. Speaker, I rise today to recognize these scouters from the Natural State Council who have been awarded national recognition in 2024. The Silver Antelope, created in 1942, honors scouters who've demonstrated exceptional character and provided distinguished service within one of Scouting's 16 territories across our country. The Natural State Council is delighted to see the recognition of Ray Dillon of Little Rock and Anthony Seitz of Conway as 2024 winners of the Silver Antelope Award. The Boy Scouts would not exist without the foundational help of their volunteers. They make Scouting successful. The responsibility for ensuring that our youth receive mentorship and guidance that they need to develop as strong leaders rests with volunteers like Ray and Tony. I congratulate them both on this national recognition of their decades of service. Mr. Speaker, I rise today to celebrate the 50th anniversary of the National Guard Professional Education Center in North Little Rock, Arkansas. In 1974, then Governor Dale Bumpers recognized the need for a place to train National Guards men and women from across the country, and he knew Arkansas would make the perfect place for such a facility. Beginning with an inaugural class of 30 soldiers from 12 states, the PEC now serves over 20,000 National Guard members from around the country every year at their base in North Little Rock, Arkansas. For 50 years, the Professional Education Center has been committed to the important work of ensuring the readiness of our National Guardsmen to respond to the challenges of today and the unknown challenges of tomorrow. The PEC at Camp Robinson is a credit to Arkansas and the nation, and I thank them for their service and dedication, and I know the next 50 years of our Professional Education Center on Camp Robinson will be absolutely just as productive and successful. And with that, I yield back to my friend from Utah, and I thank him for the time this evening.
Absolutely. Thank you to my good friend and colleague from the great state of Arkansas for his words tonight, for more so just to be able to encapsulate what you all have accomplished with these financial services packages that we're voting on this week. Again, they are a very big deal, as you mentioned, and look forward to sharing just a few thoughts on my own as we wrap up here. But thank you for the tireless work. These are meaty issues. They're hard for folks to truly understand. And it takes the real work of Congress to do stuff like this. So thank you for your leadership there. As I mentioned earlier, House Republicans are pushing legislation, again, to protect consumers and Americans' right to financial privacy. Values I believe everyone can support. And we witnessed that today with a strong bipartisan vote on this issue. The Financial Innovation and technology for the 21st Century Act, also known as Fit 21, will protect consumers and encourage innovation by creating a regulatory framework for digital asset markets through legislation, not through regulators. One of the most common frustrations that I get back in the 1st District of Utah is this concept of why does the administrative state have so much influence? Why is there so much executive overreach? And this isn't just geared towards one administration. They're very frustrated with pretty much all of President Biden's policies, his executive actions, whether it be the student loan repayment stuff that he's doing, or just the inability to implement solid policy at the border, and all of the things that he removed in protections there. They are so frustrated at executive overreach in general, and I think you see that play out in why Congress oftentimes has such low approval ratings. Today was a day that we are pushing back against that. We can always blame the administration, but part of it is we have to look at ourselves and say, what are we doing to find a path forward, find a way to get something accomplished? And we've actually had several of these moments in this House majority, in this Republican majority, in this 118th Congress, and today was definitely one of those days. We are making it so the executive branch is going to work the way they're supposed to. This legislation should go to the Senate. It should get a vote. It will garner the same type of bipartisan support that it got here in the House today and should be signed into law. As digital assets and blockchain technologies continue to develop, Fit 21 takes a critical step toward market certainty for consumers and innovators. Rather than regulation by enforcement, Fit 21 will establish clearer regulatory lines between the SEC and CFTC, as well as ensure digital asset providers have a pathway to raise funds. Fit 21 would also protect consumers and the broader ecosystem through measures that establish transparent disclosure requirements, including requiring a digital asset developer to provide information about a digital asset project's ownership and operational structure, create a comprehensive registration system for digital asset institutions to serve customers in the market, and 3, ensuring that customer-facing digital asset exchanges and brokers provide disclosures to their customers and take steps to reduce those conflicts of interest, Speaker. We have seen what regulatory certainty and pro-growth policies can do to help American industries thrive. I commend Chairman Thompson of the Agriculture Committee and Chairman McHenry of the Financial Services Committee and members of both of those committees for their hard work on this important legislation, as we heard earlier from Mr. Hill. This is hard work. Actually finding consensus to move something forward is the tough work of Congress. We're also supporting, House Republicans are also leading efforts this week legislatively in supporting the CBDC Anti-Surveillance State Act, which is critical to blocking federal bureaucrats from creating a central bank digital currency. A CBDC could allow a China-like reality in which our financial system could be used against Americans as the government monitors transactions and tracks customer behaviors. As I shared earlier today, implementing a central bank digital currency is simply un-American. There are a few things that could totally infringe on our freedoms and autonomy more than currency. There are only a few things that could totally infringe on that more than a currency that can be closely tracked, withheld, and weaponized based on our behaviors, causes, and political leanings. This bill ensures Congress maintains its authority over CBDCs so that if a CBDC were authorized, it will receive robust attention and vetting by elected officials. I can't stress enough that with the way that this digital currency is trending, and we see it from other nations, the ability to quickly track it directly offends our American right to privacy on this important aspect of our financial freedom. And again, we're taking the steps today with the House Republican majority to find a path forward and do this the way that the Constitution envisioned that we would actually work here, to find a way to make this into law and to actually address these issues. It's a world that is, again, difficult to understand, And that's why this is such tough work. And again, I commend the members on the Financial Services and Agriculture Committee to get this right, to put forth the legislation, receive a bipartisan support, send it over to the Senate, and hopefully get passed into law soon. Mr. Speaker, thank you to my colleagues that participated in this and for the successful week that we're having back here in our legislative session, the last one in the month of May. We look forward to advancing more key legislation tomorrow. And with that, I yield the remainder of my time to the chair.
Under the Speaker's announced policy of January 9th, 2023, the chair recognizes the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Roy, for 30 minutes.
I thank the Speaker. Anybody who's watching the world events unfolding today is well aware that our dear friends in Israel are under attack, but they're not just under attack by Hamas. They are in fact under attack from the anti-Western civilization radical progressives across the globe, and in particular at the International Criminal Court. And in all ways, with respect to this attack on Israel, on Western civilization, on our own values, on the abuse of an international organization with no real legitimacy, the International Court, the United States should have Israel's back. Let's look back for a second at October 7th. Let's look at what Israel is dealing with in addition to a long history of being under attack, of facing foes in the Middle East, of having to live in constant fear of attack, of having to live under the technology provided in mutual relationship between the United States and Israel with Iron Dome and with David Sling and with all the technology to shoot missiles down. How many Americans would like to be sitting in Manhattan or in D.C. or in Austin, Texas, or in Dallas or in San Francisco or any other part of this country and be sitting there knowing that the only reason they're safely sitting there is that the missiles that are constantly being fired at them are being taken down by technology? I don't think that would sit too well with most Americans. I don't think most Americans would sit back if rockets were being fired into our nation from Juarez into El Paso. I don't think we'd just sit back and say, oh, that's great, fine, keep firing missiles, we'll just put up a shield and shoot them down. I think we would do something about it, and I think it would be pretty violent. And I think we would be right to do so. Look at October 7th for our friends in Israel. Let's start with the fact that 22 American citizens were killed. Let's add to it that 1,000 Israelis or more were killed. Almost 3,000 injured. 4,500 rockets were fired in from Gaza by Hamas into Israel. 1,300 targets were struck. Not since the Holocaust has this large a number of Jews been killed in a single day. That's the truth. Hamas beheaded at least 40 babies. Let that sink in for a minute. Hamas beheaded at least 40 Israeli babies. Hamas terrorists not only raped and murdered Israeli women, they forced husbands, families, and friends to watch. That happened. We have documentary evidence. We know this occurred. A compilation of those atrocities captured on video shows gunmen shooting the dead bodies of civilians in cars, militants in the process of beheading a body with a hoe, burnt corpses thrown in a dumpster. Eyewitnesses on October 7th, quote, "To be afraid for your kid's life and your wife, it's a whole new level of fearing," a survivor of the attacks in Israel on October 7th said. Quote, "I just waited pretty much that they will come and murder me, my wife and my kids inside our house. I thought maybe if the terrorists enter my house, I would go out so they will kill me and they will leave my family aside." There's another one. "It was the worst horrific war scenes that you see only in movies around us," said another survivor. Another, "The gunfire was nonstop and we're waiting and waiting and it's continuing. You hear the only weapons of Hamas and realize no one is here to save us." Another one, "As a woman who was there, I can say that the fear is endless. It can't be described in words. To be a woman in captivity is to be in constant fear, but the men there also undergo abuse," said one who was abducted during the October 7th attack. There remain today over 100 hostages being held. So now steps in the International Criminal Court, the ICC. When President Trump came into office, he rightfully recognized the threat of the International Criminal Court. The International Court was created under the guise of investigating and prosecuting the world's most serious crimes, but actually represents a significant threat to our nation's sovereignty. In 2020, when President Trump came into office, he issued an executive order punishing by way of sanctions anyone at the ICC that goes after the United States service members, or our allies, such as Israel. What did President Biden do in all of his infinite wisdom? He revoked those sanctions as soon as he got into office, effectively giving the ICC a free pass to target United States citizens and our allies, such as Israel. They made an escalatory and unprecedented step just recently, threatening to issue illegitimate arrest warrants for Prime Minister Netanyahu and other Israeli officials for alleged war crimes in Gaza. The application marks the first time the ICC has sought to prosecute a major United States ally or the leader of a democratic country. What you are seeing happen is an unprecedented assault on Western civilization, on Israel, and by extension on our sovereignty as America. Now, I view this court as an illegitimate court. It has no authority over America. Technically, we are a signatory to the court because President Clinton signed on, but did not submit it to the Senate for any kind of ratification, so it has no legal force in America. But do you think that the ICC will target Americans? You bet they will. If we don't act right now to quash what is occurring with the ICC targeting the Prime Minister of Israel, think about that. An international court with no real legal authority in the United States is targeting the Prime Minister of Israel for responding with military force to the attacks, rockets, murders, rapes, beheadings levied against the citizens he represents as the Prime Minister, levied against them directly from Hamas. A nation, by the way, Israel, which has taken the unprecedented step in history to give warnings to citizens, civilians in Gaza, up to 2 weeks advance notice. In one case, dropping 15 million leaflets across Gaza to warn them, you need to clear out because we're going to take out these Hamas facilities. Leaving text messages, voicemails, taking every step possible to warn civilians to move away from Hamas targets. This is going to be studied for years to come, what Israel's been doing to keep the civilian to combatant casualty as low as it is. We believe somewhere between 1 and 2. Frankly, well below the norms and the standards the United Nations talks about, well below some of the historic norms even for the United States. This must be stopped because when they're going after the Prime Minister of Israel, they're going to go after us. But even put that aside, we can't stand by and allow an international tribunal to be targeting our ally and friend Israel for simply defending itself against attack. This is why I was proud to join with Representative Mast from Florida, Representative Stefanik from New York, to introduce the Illegitimate Court Counteraction Act to impose sanctions on the ICC officials who seek to go after U.S. citizens or our allies, modeled very similarly to the Trump executive order. Also mirrored in legislation offered by Senator Tom Cotton from Arkansas over in the United States Senate. As I've stated, the ICC, the International Criminal Court, is an illegitimate court. It represents a threat to the United States and our sovereignty. Frankly, we should be more aggressive than what we've put in this legislation. But we're seeking to move quickly in a world in which the current administration is at war with Israel while they're trying to contend that they're allies. In 2021, President Biden reportedly ignored a request for a phone call with the Israeli foreign minister. Earlier this month, President Biden threatened to cut off Israelis' military aid while they're fighting a war against Hamas. Now he's actively criticizing Israel's military strategy on the world stage. In a Politico article, top officials are publicly calling Israel's strategy in Gaza self-defeating and likely to open the door to Hamas's return, a level of criticism of the Middle East ally not seen since the war began in October. The Biden administration betrayed Israel and, frankly, our own well-being as a nation when at the United Nations earlier this year, when America abstained from a vote when the United Nations was calling and demanding for an immediate ceasefire, which would have been a one-sided ceasefire, hamstringing Israel in its defense against Hamas. The United Nations lowered its flag to mourn the recent death of the butcher of Tehran, the president of Iran. The United States Deputy Ambassador to the United Nations, Robert Woods, stood for the moment of silence in honor of the former president of Iran. This is what this administration is doing. They're taking steps directly to undermine Israel. We have never seen this kind of unprecedented undermining of one of, if not our closest ally, at a time when they most need our support. And look, I am not one to believe in blind support. I've in fact voted against funding here because I thought the funding was foolish and misguided because it included funding that would go to Hamas. We voted for, I think, about $15 or $16 billion of aid to Israel, something I generally supported. But it included $9 billion in humanitarian aid, which we knew, based on history, common sense, and experience, would go to Hamas. And in fact, it is. We should not blindly support anybody. We should not just write blank checks. We should not pat ourselves on the back for support. But when you've got an international criminal court that has no legal force in the United States, when you've got an international criminal court threatening to go after the prime minister of our very close, if not closest ally, for defending itself when it's having rockets fired out of itself and against enemies that beheaded 40 of their own babies, I'm sorry. That criminal court needs to be forcefully condemned by the United States. But at the same time, this is all going on. And I hope we will bring forward this legislation forthwith. It is a good bill. It has, I think, 60 co-sponsors and growing with a cross-section ideologically of the conference. I hope we will bring this bill forward when we get back from the Memorial Day recess. And I want to compliment the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, for his work in trying to move this bill forward. I want to compliment the Chairman of the Foreign Affairs Committee, Michael McCaul, for his work in trying to get this forward and working with a broad cross-section of us to get legislation to condemn the International Criminal Court, pass sanctions, force them to understand that if they're going to act against our ally, if they're going to take an unprecedented step of issuing warrants against the Prime Minister for alleged war crimes, that we will sanction them and that they will have no welcome mat in the United States. By sanctioning, we mean that all of the actors involved would not be welcome here, their families would not be welcome here, their visas would be revoked, and other penalties and measures, including any funds that potentially flow from the United States to get to the International Criminal Court, which are not supposed to occur, but often do through these various NGOs, that we would take all the steps we can to undermine an International Criminal Court that has no basis. But while that is going on, remember this. At every stage of the war from October 7th, the regime of Egyptian President al-Sisi has undermined Israel's war effort in a bid to prevent the Jewish state from defeating Hamas. Now, the financial interests of the al-Sisi family appear to have been advanced significantly through cooperation with Hamas efforts to build tunnels across the border with Egypt. Now, how do we know that? Well, in the last 10 days or so, going back to May 11th, Israel revealed that during the early stages of the IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces operation in Rafah, now pause for a second. The world geniuses, all of the elites in the world body said, no, Israel can't go into Rafah. They were adamant about it. These are war crimes. You can't go into Rafah. There are, civilians there. Well, Israel's been going into Rafah. They need to root out the battalions there. They need to kill more Hamas. They need to destroy Hamas, leveling it to the ground, minimize civilian casualties, and find every way they can to restore peace and well-being by destroying their enemy. We would want nothing less as Americans, I assure you. Israel revealed that during the early stages of their operation in Rafah, IDF forces discovered more than 50 underground tunnels that traverse the international border between Egypt and Gaza. This story is not getting nearly the attention that it deserves. What is it that the international bodies, what is it that the people and Palestinians in Gaza and the folks associated with Hamas and those that are enemies of Israel, what is it that they didn't want us to know? The scope of the cross-border tunnel project indicates that Egyptian authorities were not merely aware of Hamas's operation, they were supporting it. They were partners. They were making money. All by the way that there's all sorts of existing international agreements dating back to 1979 between Egypt and Israel. How much American money is flowing to Egypt? How much American money is flowing to the very countries and the very entities that are attacking Israel? And here, they didn't want people to go into Rafah. They didn't want Israel to go in. Why? Because they knew that the game was going to be given up. That there is a concerted, coordinated effort throughout the Middle East region to find ways to dismantle, disrupt, attack, and destroy Israel. That's the truth. And this president is effectively supporting it, pulling back on the resources given to Israel, undermining diplomacy, calling for one-sided ceasefires, funding Iran, lifting sanctions on Iran, allowing billions of dollars of their oil money to flow to China, which is enriching Iran and empowering China, undermining our national security, undermining our ally Israel. That's all occurring right now, all while the International Criminal Court is targeting the Prime Minister of Israel. Now look, there's nothing new. Egypt has tried to undermine Israel's military operations in Gaza every step of the way. Egypt has blocked the exit of Gazans from the war zone. Egypt has blocked humanitarian aid from entering Gaza while accusing Israel of genocide at the International Court of Justice. Egypt has threatened to abrogate its peace treaty with Israel and tied the future of the peace to Israel's bowing to pressure not to operate in Rafah. Egypt has undermined hostage talks and waged political warfare against Israel at the United Nations and other international arenas. There is nothing new here except we now know, right in front of us, the new information about Egypt reveals what we've known about the region's attack and assault on Israel. 50 tunnels, and they keep counting them. Bodies of hostages have been found in the tunnels. It's been clear that there's been the movement of weaponry through the tunnels. But this is just more of the same from an administration that is endangering America on the world stage, undermining the safety and security of the American people. A disastrous, radical, progressive Democratic regime in the White House. Basically, all that regime is propping up a president and using him as a puppet to carry out their radical leftist agenda. There has been no accountability for the disastrous Afghanistan withdrawal. There's been no justice for the 13 service members who died there. No accountability for the billions in military equipment left behind. This administration has created the worst border crisis in the history of our nation, endangered our citizens. Authorities in this country apprehended an illegal alien just this week with a van they called a rape dungeon on wheels. They found children's toys inside with condoms and ropes. This is your country. This is happening in your backyard. There are little girls getting sold into this sex trafficking trade while we speak. An illegal alien from Nicaragua was accused of restraining and blindfolding a 12-year-old girl while attempting to sexually assault her. The alien illegally crossed the Texas border in October of 2021 and was released. 80 known or suspected terrorists have been encountered at the southwest border just in fiscal year 24, more than all of those encountered in FY 17 to 21 combined. Meanwhile, we've sent $175 billion for a proxy war in Ukraine. We have no clear strategy and no defined objective, no oversight on spending. This administration is endangering the citizens it is supposed to be taking care of under the Constitution and defending our borders and securing us against enemies, foreign and domestic. That's the truth. There is no defense. If organizations like the ICC, the International Criminal Court, if organizations like the United Nations, if organizations like the World Health Organization and the rest of them actually cared about human rights, they'd be going after the real war criminals. They don't care about Hamas's crimes. Yeah, they say the ICC, they're issuing warrants for Hamas. But they're trying to constrain Israel from going out and attacking and destroying Hamas. What they care about is attacking and tearing down everything that is great and good with Western civilization that has done more for more people around this world than any other civilization in history. And whether the president knows it's going on or not, that's what the Biden administration's actions have all been driving towards these past 3 years. They're destroying our sovereignty and weakening us on the outside while pushing chaos, economic ruin, and moral disintegration domestically. I hope my colleagues will support the ICC sanctions bill. It's important. I hope we'll all support it. But I have to address one other thing, because while I think we'll have unity among Republicans in pushing back on this International Criminal Court that's undermining our sovereignty and targeting our friend and ally Israel, and while I hope that we will be able to speak with one voice when we get back on that subject, there's another thing that's going on consistently here in this town. 18 months ago, some of us set out to change the institution. We set out to change the rules and open up the process and be able to have more amendments, have more voice for the entirety of the majority in the decision-making of the leadership. And for a while, that resulted in some changes. Last year, we were able to get Republican and broad support for what we call the Limit, Save, Grow Act in order to put forward a vision for limiting the increase in debt while expanding fiscal responsibility. It was good legislation. We passed the strongest border security bill that we've ever passed. It had no amnesty in it. It had legitimate border security measures that have been rejected by Democrats, but which would, by any objective measure, secure the border of the United States, and almost assuredly would have meant that the killer who was paroled into the United States by the Biden administration would not have been able to be paroled and would not have been able to kill Laken Riley. We passed that bill. We passed that bill as Republicans, uniting to do that. We passed 7 appropriations bills. We processed about 1,100 amendments. We were able to move the ball forward in order to unite, in order to get this train back on track to see if we could do the appropriations process the right way. But there are many people in this body, particularly among my Republican colleagues, who want to hide behind rules and hide behind votes on rules, taking down rules, to say that we're not actually carrying out regular order. Now, what does that mean for the average citizen out there? There are people in this town who want to have every excuse possible for blowing the budget of the United States, racking up debt, leaving the border wide open, sending more money overseas for endless wars, and then coming to us and crying about how somehow we don't get it. We don't get it, you see. We're supposed to all work as a team and agree to all the rules. Does it matter what's in the rule? What good is unity if your unity is for a terrible and stupid and destructive purpose? What good is unity if unity is going to rack up more debt and destroy our budget, destroy our children's futures, and empower bureaucrats, empower tyrants, take away liberty, leave borders open, allow people to die, empower China, send money to Ukraine? What good are promises to say that you're going to secure the border of the United States before you deal with Ukraine and then do nothing of the sort? What good are rules that carry out that as the result? When you hear a Republican decrying the fact that some of us want to say no and stand athwart history, yelling stop, to quote William F. Buckley, ask them what they've done. Ask them what they've done to limit spending, cut spending, secure the border, do anything they said they would do. Ask them to prove it. Ask them to show their votes. Because nothing is going to change in this town as long as people bow down to the power brokers who tell you how it is. I will again state on the floor of this chamber, I answer to God, the Constitution, and the 750,000 people who sent me here. I answer to no committee chairman. I answer to no speaker. I answer to no colleague. I answer to those Texans I represent and following the law. My election certificate is every bit as valuable as anybody else's here. And if they don't like it and they want to go home and explain why they saddle up with Democrats for more Democrat support and majority Democrat support, and they want to try to explain their votes, go ahead. Explain the kill switches on cars that you voted for. Explain the Republicans who voted against defunding UNRWA last September, 3 weeks before Israel was attacked by people funded by UNRWA. Explain that. The American people sent us here to change this place. I had a colleague just a minute ago in a meeting who was just saying, been here 14 years, and we've done nothing of the things that we set out to do. Amen. We have an obligation as members of this body to actually do the things we said we would do. I believe that the efforts that we set out to do 18 months ago resulted in positive change, and I'm not going to let go of those things. We did manage to hold spending, non-defense spending flat. Defense spending that went up was paid for out of the hide of the IRS expansion and out of COVID money. We passed the best border security bill we could. We set the terms of the fight with the Limit, Save, Grow bill for the defense spending bill. We put caps in place, which have already been busted. We started to push this place in the right direction, and that is the direction we ought to go back to. Over the next 5 or 6 months, the American people are going to have choices to make. I believe that they ought to return a Republican majority in the House and give us a Republican majority in the Senate, and I think they ought to put Donald Trump in the White House. But none of that will matter if Republicans aren't willing to come here and do what we said we would do and put every ounce of your election certificate on the line to do what you said you would do. Because we didn't come here to sit around for 2 years talking about how we get reelected. We came here to save the country. I hope that is what we will focus on doing. And I hope most Americans will sit and watch my friend from Arizona's detailed explanations of where this country is headed if we do not seek not just fiscal responsibility in the broadest sense, but as he will no doubt say in a few minutes, smart ways that we go about doing what we can do to save this country with its mountains of debt piling up for a variety of reasons, all of which are things we could deal with if we just had the courage to do it instead of looking at each other, talking about the next election. Once we get elected, we should do something with it. With that, I will yield back.
the Speaker's announced policy of January 9th, 2023, the Chair recognizes the gentleman from Arizona, Mr. Schweikert, for 30 minutes.
Thank you, Speaker Pro Tem. And to my friend from Texas, your intro was actually brilliant because we're going to try to do something this evening that is going to make a whole bunch of people really cranky. And that is, we're going to talk about, Mr. Speaker, let's see if I can frame this in a way that I don't sound too much like a jerk. Week after week after week after week, I've come to the floor here and walked people through saying, okay, you know, the blue here, that's portion we get to vote on. And that every dime a member of Congress votes on is on borrowed money. This is all borrowed, plus actually a portion of your Medicare, if you look at the math, is actually borrowed. And interest this year gross interest is going to be $1.2 trillion, making interest the second biggest expense in this government. But one of the arguments I've come over and over and over is trying to find moral, effective ways that we can save ourselves. That you could actually impact this remarkable amount of debt where we're hovering around borrowing about $100,000 a second, every second of every day. We're just a little below that. And then the really uncomfortable is when you walk through the data, it's interest and healthcare. And I'm not a doctor. I'm good at math. The dear Lord gave me sort of one thing. I'm good at math. But I thought I'd try something new and exciting. How about if I brought my friend who just happens to be benefited with a medical school education, that's why we'll call you Dr. Harris, and talk about if healthcare is the primary driver of U.S. sovereign debt, why not engage in the morality of a society that's healthier, that could be more vibrant? And I've come here and we've talked about diabetes being 33% of all U.S. healthcare, being 30% of Medicare spending, the cascade of conditions that come from obesity in America, and the fact that the morality of loving our brothers and sisters and having a healthier society. And my economists, right now, we're working on our reply to the president's budget, and this is a rough, we're vetting all the math and we're highlighting things, but a preliminary view, and we're still about 2 more weeks from our publication. We estimate that obesity will result in anywhere between 8.2 and 9.1 trillion in excess medical expenditures over the next decade. Maybe the most powerful thing you and I could do for U.S. sovereign debt and burying your retirement and our children, our great-grandchildren, our great-great-grandchildren in piles of debt would actually working on policies to make us a healthier society. You get the benefits of the morality and really good math. And I just happen to have a medical doctor who's a member of Congress, who's on the Appropriations Committee, who has an expertise that I don't have and can talk about things that I can't say. But understand, we mean this from a portion of optimism. There is a path here. But we got to do something that's brutally uncomfortable for us. We got to tell the truth. Is that a fair setup?
Well, I want to thank the gentleman from Arizona for yielding some time today. The gentleman, if you to those who see the gentleman virtually every week come up here and talk about the economics of the United States and our debt problems and things like that, today we're going to take a little different view, because we're going to talk about something that doesn't just have to do with economics. It has to do with providing a healthier America. An America where Yes, we would save money if we were healthier, but the other benefits are so tremendous. We're not doing this just because we want to save money. We're doing this because we think this is actually the right approach for Americans. And there are a couple of diseases. If you look at the cost of health care, about 70% is to take care of chronic diseases. And the big chronic diseases are hypertension, diabetes, and obesity. They're the big chronic diseases. You know, cancer is not a chronic, it's an acute disease. It's the chronic diseases that are costing literally hundreds of billions of dollars to the United States. So it would help, and today we're going to focus on obesity. Now, hopefully in the future we'll focus on diabetes, maybe on hypertension, but obesity, and the reason why it's so important to start with these three is that the amount of spending, as the gentleman indicates, is tremendous. I mean, the last time, and I'm going to pull some data from this study from the Milken Institute. It's called America's Obesity Crisis. It was from 2018, so it's 5.5 years ago, October 2018. But it's subtitled "The Health and Economic Costs of Excess Weight." The health and economic costs, because they're both costs. Again, it's not just dollars and cents; they count. But the fact of life is just not as good for someone who has a chronic disease. So let's do something to prevent it. But the first thing you have to do is you have to say, okay, well, what's the history of obesity in the United States? Because I think if people look around and people are honest, they go, well, yeah, look, I've been on this earth 67 years. I will tell you it's been noticeable that more Americans, and it's true throughout the world, but concentrate on America, more Americans are obese or overweight. And these are medical definitions. If you are higher than the normal range of weight, you are overweight if you're slightly higher, and then you're obese if you're higher than that, and then severe obesity if you're, or we used to call it morbidly obese as well. But the interesting thing is, back in using these definitions, the same definitions, in 1962, 3.4% of adults were considered obese. 3.4%. So that's, again, it's not overweight, it's obese. It's more than overweight, it's obese. In 2000, so from 1962, 3.4%. In 2000, 30.5%. In 2016, 39.8%. So 8 years ago, 39.8%. And the latest data the CDC has, which is from 2017 to 2020, 41.9%. 41.9% of Americans classified as obese. Now, why is that classification important? By the way, the demographic breakdown is very interesting, because as we go to say, what we ought to be doing is we ought to be looking at the demographics and paying attention to where it exists in the population. 49.9% of black adults are obese, 45.6% of Hispanic adults, 41.4% of white adults, 16.1% of Asian adults. So it actually is overrepresented in the black and Hispanic communities. But why is that important? And oh, by the way, children, that's adults. The striking thing is for children in the last year that we have data, 16.1% overweight, 19.3% obese. 1 in 5 children are considered obese. 1 in 16, 6.1% severe obesity in children. And again, that severe obesity in children number is actually higher at 6.1% than the entire adult population back in 1962. But it begs the question, so why is it so important that we identify obesity? It's because I think a lot of people don't understand the broad range of diseases, including expensive healthcare diseases, in which the risk of that disease is higher if you are obese. Now, it's not everybody who's obese has these problems, but if you're obese, you're statistically more likely to have these problems. And I just want to read the list so you understand why this is such a large economic problem. Alzheimer's and vascular dementia. Most people don't realize obesity is a risk factor for that. And we worry a lot about that because the cost of Alzheimer's in America and the treatment is measured in, the hundreds of billions of dollars. Asthma and COPD, breast cancer. We know that cancers are chronic back pain, colorectal cancer, congestive heart failure, again, a large consumer of healthcare dollars, coronary artery disease, diabetes, of course, and again, diabetes and obesity kind of go hand in hand, but only 20% of the cost of obesity, again, the approximately $1.7 trillion annual cost back in 2016, only 20% of that can be attributed to the coexistence of diabetes and obesity. So again, diabetes has to be handled by itself. Obesity a risk factor for it. Dyslipidemia, so people with high cholesterol and lipids, end-stage renal disease, endometrial cancer, esophageal adenocarcinoma, gallbladder cancer, gallbladder disease, gastric adenocarcinoma, so stomach cancer, hypertension, liver cancer, osteoarthritis, ovarian cancer, pancreatic cancer, prostate cancer, renal cancer, and stroke. All of these have a higher incidence in someone with obesity. So scientifically, they say, okay, if we can reduce obesity, we'll reduce the incidence of all these diseases and the costs associated with them. And the costs associated with them attributable to obesity is over $1.5 trillion a year. Both direct costs, the cost to actually treat someone, and the indirect cost, the cost of decreased productivity and decreased contribution to the GDP and the economy by someone who is ill. So always indirect and direct costs. But these numbers are just staggering.
And yet, I promise you, tomorrow we'll have things on our phone attacking us for telling the truth. Mr. Speaker, I'm going to argue our willingness to come here and tell the truth. I love people. I want them to flourish. I want you... Look, we're about to have, We're about to have our 5th year of prime-age males. Their life expectancy is shorter. You were actually walking me through some of the math earlier. Does anyone care? The concentration I see of the lack of family formation, of the productivity, the ability to participate in society, the healthcare costs. What would happen if instead of having a society where we were afraid to talk about it, the stigma, but we're saying there are policies, and I have the stacks of charts and these things, but there are policies we can engage in to make a difference. Look, this is on topic and uncomfortable, but one of the things I've come here and over talked about, let's just use this chart down here. Medicare is singularly our primary driver of our debt. It's healthcare costs, but it's an earned benefit. You paid your 40 quarters for Social Security, you paid in, but the average couple will have paid in $227,000 in FICA taxes, that portion that goes towards Medicare. But they get back $725,000. That differential right there is the primary driver of U.S. sovereign debt. Do you do what some of the folks around here want to do, my Democrat colleagues, where they want to basically say Medicare for all, we're going to ration it, it's going to be government, everything from the doctors you have are going to be government employees, that sort of model? Or should we actually take on something much more moral, much more creative, and much more, actually, I would argue, doable? Let's actually look at the government policies we engage in where we functionally subsidize people's misery. Could we actually turn some of the very programs we have and make them more moral and help make our society healthier? And Doc, I know that's been one of your fixations. You've been in front of committees over and over talking about things we could do, everything from agricultural legislation, nutrition legislation, the things I do in Ways and Means of trying to finance access to therapies to make people healthier.
Sure. So just today in my subcommittee, I chair the subcommittee on agriculture on the Appropriations Committee, and we're in charge of funding the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, SNAP program. Now, if you were paying attention about an hour and a half ago, the folks from the other side of the aisle, all they want to do is look, let's just push more money into the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. Now, the second word there, by the way, is nutrition. That program was founded, if you go back to the original founding, the program was founded to provide nutrition. Now, in the early days of the program, there were a significant number of people in the country who actually did not receive enough calories. Like literally, they didn't receive enough calories. So at that time, it was, the emphasis was, okay, let's get food of all kinds to these folks so that they're not calorie starved. But what we see from the trend, again, I talked about the trend in obesity. Something is happening. And you have programs like the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, where the last time they looked at it was in 2016, where it might have been earlier actually than that, where 10% of the funds, now remember, this is a $122 billion a year program, taxpayer dollars. We ask taxpayers to pony up or to borrow $122 billion to put into the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. 10% is on sugary soda. 10%, $12 billion, our best estimate, spent on something that we now know. Maybe 40, 50 years ago when the obesity rate was 6%, we didn't know that, or 3+%. But we do know now what contributes to obesity. We do know that insulin resistance, the presence of sugars and processed foods in the diet directly cause obesity. And of course, diabetes, which again we'll get to in the future, and probably also hypertension to some extent. These are all interrelated diseases. But we actually know that that's bad. And I've proposed just saying, look, let's just take out non-nutritious, it's about 20%. It's 10% sugary soda beverages, another 10% salty snacks. Ultra-processed food, again, raises your insulin levels, does all the bad things that ultimately lead to increased amount of fatty tissue and obesity. So let's just say, well, yeah, we'll allow states to restrict that in a program and take that money and spend it on fruits and vegetables or something, right? Now, that sounds like a pretty novel idea. Sounds like a pretty good idea based on the scientific evidence. And the pushback has been tremendous, mainly from the other side of the aisle, which is, no, all we need to do is spend more money on this program. Well, I would suggest to the gentleman from Arizona and to people who are watching, and Mr. Speaker, we have enough proof that what we've been doing hasn't been working. In fact, it's been making the problem worse because the data on people who receive Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program is they are more obese and more overweight.
And sicker.
And of course sicker, because we know these diseases relate to them, than individuals, but the studies were done against individuals who had the same socioeconomic status, same income, but were not getting SNAP benefits.
But Doctor, the argument here, the morality argument I really want us to make is the way we've designed these programs. They originally, as they were designed decades and decades and decades ago, we now understand we're financing people's misery instead of financing the opportunity to be healthier, to be part of society, to actually live longer. It's uncomfortable, but we have to have a moment of honesty. And I don't understand the left's fixation on basically using borrowed money to finance misery.
Look, I agree. This is not just about economics. It's using borrowed money to actually cause the need for more borrowed money in the future.
On the economic side, we call it knockoff effects, second degree, third degree effects. In some ways, they're not even that. They're the principal effects.
It's direct.
Yeah.
And again, even if this were economically neutral, but it's not, one would make the argument that the right thing to do for people is to give them a better, healthier life.
Yeah.
And to use, we had, in the hearing today, we had, someone suggest, well, all we need to do is do public service announcements. We'll just do education. And one of the experts says, quite accurately, that when you deal with an addiction, and we won't get into that today, but by the way, so just so everybody understands, it's now pretty clear from brain chemistry that sugar And when we mean sugar, mostly it's fructose, because the other sugar is, cane sugar, which is sucrose, a combination of fructose and glucose. But fructose, basically, that we understand that it is actually physically addictive in the brain because it results through the modifier of MGO, a chemical called MGO, which binds to receptors in the brain. It actually releases dopamine.
Yep.
Now, every single...
Would this explain my ice cream problem?
Well, it could. Every single addictive issue in front of us involves, and this is whether it's a addiction like opioid addiction, whether it's an addiction like sugar addiction or addiction like gambling, or take out your cell phones. The fact that our youth now spend 7 hours a day on a cell phone, on the internet and playing games and things, is because this is designed to release dopamine in the brain. So we understand the exact same mechanism. And it's up to us. And then the people will say, well, just educate, or government shouldn't be involved with this. Wait a minute. We're talking about regulating the industry for children with regards to apps. We're talking about regulating the opioid industry because it's addictive. We talk about dealing with gambling because it's addictive. Why wouldn't we talk about a food addiction that leads to misery and huge economic costs?
Well, but, Doctor, look, in this, my personal philosophy, I'm probably a little bit more libertarian here. Have what you want, but understand, A, should government finance things that make our population less healthy? Matter of fact, make many of them very, very, very sick. And the reality of it is, when the majority of healthcare partially is financed in some fashion through government, we have an interest. And it's, in some ways it sickens me, but that's the reality we have to sort of mechanically deal with. And then the statistics, the data is just crashing on us since the pandemic. The curve of our brothers and sisters who are getting sicker and sicker. And now I'm dealing with, some of the data we're looking at of those moving into their retirement benefits being also much sicker, and trying to figure out how we finance that. And we're financing it with partially borrowed money. It's an honestly good economics and a moral argument. Maybe we should change the way we do nutrition assistance in America. Maybe we should change even down to some of the agricultural policy of adding more variety. And I've given presentations on concentration of certain crops and the whole way commodity pricing works, and the black swan theory of that level of concentration. God forbid something ever happened to one of the crops. But it all ties together. It is a unified theory. If I care about healthcare spending and understand, Obamacare was a financing bill. It was about who got subsidized and who had to pay. Our Republican alternative was a financing bill. We're right now doing the hardest thing possible in Congress. We're actually talking about what we pay for. Could we actually reduce healthcare spending by having a healthier country, a healthier population? And that would actually be much more egalitarian with prosperity.
Look, there's no question that's true. The fact is that we can send a strong economic signal through our ability to modify what is available under food programs, not only direct payments, but also the fact that we over the past 50 years, we've kind of funneled all the production, as you said, into only a handful of major crops. In my district, for instance, they used to grow tomatoes. It used to be one of the tomato capitals of the country. I didn't even know this, but it's not anymore. It's just soybeans and corn, partly because we have a big poultry industry. But the variety of crops has just disappeared. So and again, everything comes together and everything points in the same direction. We must address the obesity crisis. We know what causes it. we actually have a pretty good idea of how to solve it, how to get there, but we have to decide that that's something that we're going to do. And I think the average American understands it. Oh, yeah. I think they do.
No, it is fascinating. When I'm home in Arizona, the number of folks I walk up to and will almost pull me aside and say, I can't believe you were willing to talk about that. You told the truth. And it's almost like they weren't ready to have those of us from the political class do something that's uncomfortable. Let's say, but the math is the math. If you take a look at mortality statistics, is it moral to have a society, particularly working prime-age males? I mean, you were actually quoting some of the statistics in our previous conversation. They're dying younger and younger. What we've done to younger people in the country, what we're doing to seniors, we can fix this. We just got to be willing to do some difficult policy here. And it's not difficult policy. There's some experiments out there. And you and I have not talked about this before, so we're winging it, where it was the food box and saying, okay, we're actually going to deliver to our brothers and sisters who need nutrition support a box. And there was the problem. Sometimes the fruits and those things were thrown away. So they actually experimented with other ways to deliver them. It's in a microwave pouch. And it turns out it was working. And they actually were making people healthier. And then that pilot program disappeared. Look, we're talking billions and billions and billions of dollars, which means there'll be armies of lobbyists in the hallway here tomorrow really cranky about what we talked about. Can we make the argument we should do the right thing? And is this Republican or Democrat? It should be just the right thing.
That's right. And you bring up a good point. You know, the first thing you start with is say, look, we don't have to change this. Let's do a few pilot programs. Let's get some data. Because otherwise it's incredibly difficult to see whether some of these ideas work to change the way people buy and their habits. And obviously, it'll take a generation for the obesity that already exists to plateau.
I'm more optimistic than you are.
Well, I mean, with Ozempic and Wegovy, maybe it's quicker, but these are not the solution. The solution is not to become obese and then take a drug to reduce the obesity. It's not to become obese in the first place. But your point is critical. Right now, a 3-year-old has a lower life expectancy than a 60-year-old had at the same age. That is, because our adults are getting these chronic diseases, they will actually, at an increasing rate, that 3-year-old, if we don't change the trajectory, will actually have a much less of a chance to live to the same age as their grandfather did or their father did. That is, we cannot accept that in America. That our children, we are in a situation where our children have a lower life expectancy than us. Oh my gosh. This is the opposite of everything anybody does anything for. As a father, you want to do everything for your children so they have it better than you. We're actually, kind of intentionally, because we intention how we spend dollars, we're actually forcing our children to a shorter life expectancy than we had. Shame on us if we don't fix this.
Look, we're already crushing the next 3 generations. My wife's exactly my age, so I have an 8-year-old. I have a 23-month-old. Mathematically, my 23-month-old, when he is 20 years old, U.S. taxes will have to be double what they are today to maintain baseline services. This is what we're doing to our society. And we're coming behind these microphones and trying to say, we've done the economic presentations. Hey, we can do the Democrats' tax scheme. You get about 1.5% of GDP if you were able to tax maximize everything. For those of us who want to cut things, we get about a point of non-discretionary, discretionary non-defense. But that's, $300 billion there, if we could cut that much. Okay, so 2.5%. This year, this fiscal year so far, we were expected to borrow about 5.5% of GDP. We're closer to 9%. Does anyone see a math problem there? If this is everything, the political rhetoric of they want to raise taxes, we want to cut, and you only get this much, maybe we need to promote policies that disrupt the cost of government, the cost of health care. A couple weeks ago, I gave a series of presentations here of using technology, using AI, those things, to make government much, much smaller. We can do things like this. There are a path. Mr. Speaker Pro Tem, are we up against time?
Your time has expired.
Doctor, thank you for joining me. Mr. Speaker, with that, I yield back.
Do you have a motion?
Mr. Speaker, I would like to move that the House stand adjourned.
The question is on the motion to adjourn. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The motion is adopted. Accordingly, the House stands adjourned until 10 a.m. tomorrow.